us from New York is Michael Wolff, CEO of Activate, to dig into all the tech themes from the auto show. It was big at CES as well, Michael. Talk to us about, it's interesting listening to GM there saying autonomous driving, driverless cars will actually start through subscription, will start through sharing of driving. Do you believe the same?
I think that each of the auto manufacturers is trying to get into the services business. So they're looking at Uber, they're looking at how much traffic goes through Uber, and they're looking for ways in which they can be in that business, in which they can have ongoing revenue streams. But you know, technology usually follows progressions. And the automobile manufacturers have a lot to do before they get to self-driving cars. For example, improving the experience inside the car. And that's why we see the integrations that are announced with Microsoft putting its Cortana into cars like Nissan and Renault. I think the second is electric cars. And I think that as much as the car manufacturers talk about autonomous vehicles, they'll be much farther down the road.
Yeah, when we spoke to Peggy Johnson of Microsoft, she herself at CES was saying it'll be connected vehicles that dominate by 2020. But when do you see autonomous, driverless cars really taking to the streets in a wide-ranging way? I
think they're going to be waves. It's likely to begin in major cities where roads are well-defined. And I think that we're really more like 10 years out before we see this practically on every highway.
So are car companies spending in the right way at the moment, Michael? It's interesting when you look over in Europe, you're looking at some of the German manufacturers. Volkswagen has been ploughing money into Get, which is an Uber rival, 300 million there. You saw Daimler buying the likes of MyTaxi. Is it these sorts of purchases in startups? Are they spending money wisely?
No, they're not. What they're ending up doing is they're ending up fragmenting the market. They're ending up trying to compete with Uber, which in a lot of ways is a fool's errand. Uber has a very strong share in the market, and so they're better off partnering with Uber and any of the other Lyft and other ride-sharing services that are at scale versus trying to build their own.
And when it comes to the likes of Apple and Google, we've seen some of the auto giants really wary of partnering them, worried about who owns the data. Who, in your mind's eye, is the winner?
Well, I mean, each of these smart agents, the voice-activated assistants, are going to be in different cars. And so we've got Microsoft Cortana that's doing some deals. We expect to see Alexa in a number of cars. And of course, there'll be Siri in a number of cars. So what's going to change is that people are going to get used to interacting with their car in the same way that they may be interacting with their Amazon Echo at home. And all three of the major tech companies, as well as others, are going to be involved.
When you look at it from an investment point of view, is there startups that you want to be plowing money into that could be winning out from this building of an ecosystem when it comes to driverless vehicles?
There are lots of startups around the space, and most likely what they're going to be doing is producing pieces of technology, middleware that will be integrated into the car. It's not likely that we're going to see a car company standing up an entirely new car company that's going to do its own autonomous vehicles.
And what about US versus Europe versus Asia? I mean, are there other regional winners here? We seem to very much focus on Silicon Valley and Detroit.
You have to expect that each one of the major international car makers is going to focus on the same things. They're going to focus on ways in which they can try to be on autonomous vehicles. But at the same time, they're also going to be looking at those other things, electric cars, a better experience within the car. And in some ways, they're going to let the U.S. companies, they're going to let the U.S. companies get arrows in their back in the same way that pioneers do, and they can be fast followers versus throwing so much investment money out in front of this.
This is a theme that's going to run and run. Michael Wolff, CEO of Activate, thank you, and staying with us throughout the hour. Now, a deal we're watching. The software maker Atlassian is buying the popular project management app Trello for $425 million. Now, Atlassian is known for its programs Jira and HipChat. It's paying $360 million in cash, and the rest is restricted to stock and options. The deal may increase earnings, excluding some costs, in Atlassian's fiscal 2018 year. It's expected to close this quarter, pending regulatory approval and certain closing conditions. Still ahead, Juno Therapeutics is on the forefront of producing cancer-fighting drugs, but it's faced some serious setbacks after the last few months. Just check out that chart. We'll go live to JP Morgan Healthcare Conference to speak with the CEO next. And a reminder that all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are now live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg Television is live from the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco, where we've been bringing you the interviews with some of the biggest names in the industry. Very pleased to see that my colleague Eric Schatzker has joined us here in the city and is with now the CEO of a company on the forefront of cancer technology. Eric.
Caroline, thank you. We are, in fact, just blocks away at the Westin St. Francis, and I'm here with Hans Bishop. He is the CEO of Juno Therapeutics. And Hans, so that everybody knows what we're about to discuss, Juno and a very small handful of other companies are working on a certain class of immunotherapy treatments for cancer, if I understand it correctly, so-called CAR-T cell therapies, correct?
That's right.
Excellent.
CAR-T therapy and TCR therapy.
So how important is it to be first to market with a CAR-T?
Well, time to market is always an important consideration, but it's worth remembering that these technologies are in their infancy. There's still, we believe, a lot of opportunity to improve on the clinical results we're generating today, which in of themselves are very promising. So ultimately, what's most important in oncology is having best-in-class clinical results. So both of those things are important.
Anyone familiar with your company and your stock price will know that Juno was forced to suspend one of its CAR-T trials in November after a couple of patients regrettably died. Since then, one of your competitors, Kite, has submitted a new drug application to the FDA for a CAR-T treatment that targets the same antibody, C19. If we look at this as a horse race, are you behind?
We don't look at it as a horse race. Let me just be clear about that. I mean, and if we do, to answer your question, we are behind. But we don't look at it as a horse race. We absolutely believe that the technologies that you're seeing today, as encouraging as good as they are, if you go forward 3 years and look back, you're going to see improvements. And in fact, our lead compound in lymphoma already uses what we will argue is some best-in-class technology, where we control more of the things in the production of that product that we think equate to efficacy and safety. So, we need to generate more of the data, but we're quite optimistic that the data we're generating with JCAR17, even though it's behind, could indeed prove to be best in class. And if that's the case, coming second is just fine.
Now, the JCAR15 trial had to do with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, correct?
That's right.
Why is that disease proving such a difficult nut to crack for immunotherapy?
Well, we think it's most likely to do with the fact that when you treat a patient, an adult patient with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, as soon as the CAR T cells enter the blood, they see the tumor. And then they start growing these cells start growing very quickly. And we believe that the toxicities from these treatments relate to how fast the cells grow. And in ALL, there's so much growth signal to these cells, they tend to grow faster. So that's why ALL, we believe, is additionally got some additional challenges.
Is it perhaps too hard now, and instead you should focus your efforts and others should focus their efforts on lymphoma?
I don't think so. I mean, we're far from giving up on improving treatments for adult ALL patients. These patients, by the way, that we're treating have got no therapeutic options. And I think all the data we have today, acknowledging the challenges you pointed out, actually, in aggregate, really encourage me that we can come up with therapy that may even be curative.
You know, Hans, there are some people who worry that the industry and companies like yours are moving too fast with massively powerful technologies and not worrying perhaps about safety enough. Is that a fair concern?
I don't think so. I mean, and I think, of course, it's the perspective that counts. And I can tell you, if you meet a patient that today has got relapsed refractory acute ALL and can't get onto a clinical trial,
and who is going to die,
they're not going to tell you that we're moving too quickly.
Do you have any updates to explain why Juno's treatments in particular have encountered this brain swelling that has proved fatal in a number of cases?
Well, just be clear, that's so far been a problem that's pretty much focused on JCAR15 and adult ALL. We have seen this toxicity in some other places, but it's rare. And those updates, we're still going through our investigation. It's a very thorough process. So no updates yet, but I anticipate we'll have over the next few months.
At some point, you and others are going to have to consider, at the very least, pricing for CAR therapies. Any idea what it's going to cost when a treatment of this nature comes to market?
It's too early to say. I think the only good way of pricing a drug is when you've got the clinical data in your hand that supports the approval and you can make an assessment about value. But I can tell you the value these things are going to generate, we believe, could be very significant. For example, maybe the toughest reimbursement agency in the world is a group in the UK called NICE. The UK government put all of their reimbursement decisions through this agency, and they recently did a mock CAR T-cell review where they looked at pediatric ALL and asked the question, if 50% of kids on a CAR T-cell are cured, that's an if, what would be the value generation to payers? And the answer came out at $750,000 per patient. So you realize if a single dose of CAR T-cells can get 50% of children into a durable remission, that saves the system a huge amount of money. Of course, even more important is curing a kid of
no
leukemia.
Question. Hans, are you worried at all about the dismantling of Obamacare, given that so much of the work that needs to be done and ultimately will need to be performed using your treatments has to happen in a hospital environment?
I think it's too early to say. Clearly what's most important to us and companies like us is a reimbursement environment and a healthcare environment that encourages innovation. If you think about the opportunity to reduce cost of healthcare, which we're all signed up to, there are very few opportunities of really doing that without better technologies. You're not going to get there just by cutting. You need things that are going to displace a lot of the costs we use today. Leukemia is a good example. The standard of care is something called an autologous cell transplant. They cost from $400,000 to $1 million. They come with a 20% mortality risk. We have to be able to do better than that. I hope we can.
And I hope so as well. Hans, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to speak with you here on Bloomberg Television. Caroline, that is Hans Bishop. He's the CEO of Juno Therapeutics, one of the immunotherapy companies changing the game of cancer treatment.
Such a crucial conversation. Eric Schatzker all over the JP Morgan healthcare event for us in San Francisco. Now, a Bloomberg scoop for you. VimpelCom is in advanced talks to sell more than 12,000 wireless towers in Russia for about $800 million. That's according to people familiar with the matter. Macquarie Group-backed Russian Towers has been tagged as the preferred bidder. A deal could be finalized as soon as this quarter. Now coming up, CES may be wrapped up, but there are some lingering takeaways from the event for the path ahead. We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. Now, we just wrapped up another CES this year filled with big announcements from autonomous cars to AI, and our guest host, Michael Wolff, was there in the center of the action. Michael, maybe a little bit exhausted, but what really grabbed your attention?
Well, the big winner at CES was certainly Amazon with Alexa. There are over 1,000 different companies that are integrating Alexa into their products, everything from smart refrigerators to phones to cars. The other thing is where there was tons of car tech, self-driving vehicles, ways in which the automobile will change your experience inside the car. But what was most surprising was companies that are not tech companies that were presenting there. And so we had Carnival CEO Arnold Donald, who showed a new set of sensors that their guests will wear throughout their cruise to change their cruise experience. And Kevin Plank, CEO of Under Armour, showed off ways in which they're going to integrate technology in everything from your running clothes to your athletic shoes.
So how much, when you're looking at investment opportunities, you're worried that potentially the competition for buying assets is actually, well, coming from the older guard, larger companies desperate to try and reinvigorate themselves on a digital perspective?
Well, there are lots of small companies at CES, but very few of them are going to end up being acquired by big companies, because the big companies are already putting a great deal of investment into their own research. So while there are lots of small companies, many of them probably won't be around next year.
Always the upsetting element of CES, but I'm sure there are many exciting opportunity for them there to present. Michael Wolff, you were there and now recovering, I'm sure, CEO of Activate, with us throughout the hour with the CES takeaways. Coming up, our exclusive interview with EU Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager. Regulation battles with the US tech giants, from Google to Apple. What does she think? This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde. Now back to the big headline in tech. As we mentioned at the top of the hour, Alibaba Group founder and chairman Jack Ma met with President-elect Donald Trump at Trump Tower. They discussed how Alibaba is focused on creating 1 million jobs in the US over the next 5 years. Pleased to say, still with me, Michael Wolff, CEO of Activate and guest host for the hour. Your take when you're advising CEOs, when you're advising management boards of big companies, would this be something you'd be advising to them? Would you say, Jack Ma, you need to be building bridges with the US in this sort of a way?
Well, if you look at the number, take a look at the number in perspective. So there are roughly about 10 million eBay sellers who make their entire living by selling on eBay. And so it's not that surprising that you could have 1 million people who could be making their living from selling through a platform like Alibaba's Taobao. The question is, I'm not sure what they're going to be selling. And there really isn't a lot of experience in small and medium-sized businesses selling to China. So this is a huge goal. I'm not sure it's really going to be accomplished.
Huge goal when you take in perspective only 7,000 US brands currently selling on Alibaba. He wants to get to 1 million. Michael, thank you very much indeed. Meantime, while as 2017 gets going, US tech giants are gearing up for the hurdles they face in Europe. Companies like Apple, Facebook and Google all head to court to settle a number of cases regarding taxes and privacy. Bloomberg's David Gura spoke exclusively with the European Union's Competition Commissioner, Margrethe Vestager, who has famously targeted these tech titans. Take a listen.
Well, I consider this a very important issue because we cannot do our job if we do not get the right information from the businesses in question. And the concern that we have here is that Facebook didn't give us the right information during the merger procedures. And that, of course, is a huge problem if that appears to be true. Because if we're not told the full story, well, then we will not be able to take right decisions and enable competition also on the other side of each and every merger. And that is why this is so important, both in the concrete case, but of course also as a takeaway for the entire business community, that we will police our procedures to make sure that we get the right information when we ask for it, because otherwise we cannot do our job. And we try to do that as best as possible within the very, very short deadlines that we work in.
You've been looking at Google as well. You've gotten a reply. The European Union has gotten a reply from Google. How satisfied are you with what that company had to say?
Well, we just got the last part of the Android answer, so we are in the process of analyzing it, and therefore it is too early to say what will be our final decision. But we are in the process of going through it. It's very substantive, and obviously there's a lot of data to go through. So in that respect, it is too early. But now we have the working material. We have the answer from Google on the cases in question.
You've seen the rise of populism, as we all have, the shifting political firmament, and I wonder what that means for you in your office and for looking at competition in general.
Well, I think that it's very important that people see that we do our best to do the job ahead of us, to make sure that citizens are not being cheated when they're in the marketplace, that businesses do not agree with prices in the back office or petition the market, but that businesses actually do compete with products, prices, the services that they can offer customers. Because I think for every citizen, it is important to to see that the authorities do their job, and they do the job actually to service the citizens in behalf of the citizen, where the individual might be too small, but where we together actually can do something good for making our societies work. In that respect, I think that it's important what we do.
How pivotal do you see that Apple case, the Apple Ireland case, as being to your office? It certainly elevated you to a new prominence, made you better known perhaps in Silicon Valley, and there are those who have some animus toward you as a result of it. How do you make that relationship better between your office and tech firms in Silicon Valley?
Well, we of course try to make it absolutely clear that we have no issue or no grudge against any company. What we're aiming at is behavior. For instance, the thing that happens if one company or a group of companies are given state aid which is not available to other companies, that seriously sort of unlevels the playing field. That disables fair competition, and that is the issue. I don't think that as a company, when you are a competitive, when you have a competitive culture, you want to innovate, you want to present the best products to potential customers. Well, how can you approve of your competitor having benefits that are not open to yourself? And in that respect, of course, we also serve the business community by enabling fair competition.
That was the European Union's Competition Commissioner, Margrethe Vestager. Of course, still with me is Michael Wolff, Activate CEO. Do you believe that Europe is levelling the playing field, as she claims?
European regulators are missing the big picture. And the big picture here is that it's going to be very hard to regulate these companies and expect there's not going to be, that there's not going to be somebody that succeeds them. If you look back to what happened in 2009 with Microsoft, Microsoft had to unbundle its Internet Explorer from its main product. And as a result of that, and for some other reasons, now we have Google. Google's Chrome is the dominant operating system. I mean, every time regulators take apart a technology product, all they're doing is allowing for another big technology company to step in. This is really not about competition. It's really about favoring one company over the other.
When you're saying looking at the playing field, therefore, when you're looking at how Europe is evolving itself, is there any real competition, any growth of any rivals that could take on the Silicon Valley juggernauts?
Well, it's hard to imagine that anybody's going to be able to compete with the likes of Facebook and Google and Amazon. What would probably be more constructive is these countries to provide real venture funding and large amounts of money that can create new entrepreneurs, that can build new companies that aren't competing directly against those giants.
But if we do see the likes of Apple, Google having certain benefits in certain countries, does it not stifle off some growth in small competitors that can't sort of protect their profitability to such an extent with this sort of accounting?
You know, where regulation can make sure that those companies, those new companies, are not blocked from those services, it makes a great deal of sense. But to look at those companies and do something, for example, in Google and say the Android operating system is too dominant, there's nobody else that's going to create a new operating system. The operating system sort of wars are over. So really restricting it takes away innovation. It actually means that companies will not make investments, and what'll end up happening is regulate one company, it opens a window for another big company.
Well, talking of big companies, we're going to be just showing some breaking news now. Yahoo, in fact, is naming Eric Brandt as chairman. We're currently seeing that Marissa Mayer will resign from the board of Yahoo. Yahoo changing to facilitate transition of the company to an investment company, and the company name will be changed to Alt-Aber after closing. Michael, I know that you know Yahoo very well. Are these sorts of moves to be anticipated? Is saying farewell to the likes of Marissa Mayer from the board a positive step?
Well, it's part of a progression as the company has split into the core Yahoo business, which has been sold to Verizon, and the other part of the business, which has nothing to do with the operations, which is the company's ownership of Alibaba and Yahoo Japan. And so that company needs to really be managed by people who are focused on monetizing that investment and doing so in a way with the minimum amount of taxes. Marissa Mayer was brought in as an operating executive, and as the company's no longer an operating company, it makes sense for her to no longer be on the board.
Great to get your perspective, as I know that you had served on Yahoo's board and indeed were one of the people who helped Marissa Mayer come to the fore. Coming up, that was Michael Wolff, of course, his perspective on the breaking news from Yahoo. We continue later, though, our coverage of the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference with a deep dive on biotech, exploring what's next for the sector under President Trump. This is Bloomberg. Turning back to biotech and our coverage of the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference now. Third Rock Ventures was one of the most well-established biotech VCs at the showcase, having raised $1.9 billion since 2007 and boasting 44 portfolio companies. Joining us now to discuss the 2017 outlook for the sector is Third Rock Ventures partner Alexis Borisy. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. I got a little bit of a chart to kick things off with you because I wanted to look at what 2017 might mean in terms of IPOs for biotech. You go into the Bloomberg, you can dig in down. It doesn't look too pretty. If you're looking at this particular screen, $11 billion is all we got in terms of IPOs and biotech. If you're really looking at only one deal was particularly big size, $2 billion was a Samsung Biologics. Everything else sub than $1 billion. Does 2017 look prettier?
So I think 2017 is going to be a good year. 2015 was a spectacular year for IPOs. So now, if you take a 20-year context, 2017 is going to be a very good year. It's not going to be 2015. We'll probably see something like 2016, maybe a little bit better.
And when you're looking at the exit strategies of certain companies, is it therefore M&A that's happening a little bit more for 2017? Is it that we just need to wait for certain companies to hit critical mass? What is perhaps not making 2015 back on the agenda?
Well, I think we could see a strong M&A year coming here in 2017. I think it'll be also interesting to look at number of FDA approvals that come forward. 2016 was a relatively quiet year, whereas 2014 and 2015 were great years. I think 2017 could be a pretty good year.
So FDA approvals could be showing the way. What about the level of innovation just being made by some of these growing companies?
Well, I think the innovation is spectacular. And I think we're actually in a large secular bull on innovation.
Okay.
So there can be ups and downs. Biotech is a very volatile sector in the public markets, but we are really in a spectacular time of fundamental innovation.
So dig into the intricacies for us. Where are we going to be seeing the real leaps forward? Is it precision medicine? I mean, I know you've been looking at regenerative medicine as well. Are these the key areas for 2017?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more in precision medicine, more in regenerative medicine.
And precision, when we're saying about these sorts of things, give us an idea of exactly what it is. It's basically being more targeted to me as an individual.
That's right. The right drug for the right person. Blueprint Medicines is an example of this.
So big data can suddenly start helping the targeting. Is it that the way?
Well, that's right. That's another trend along with precision medicine, which is convergence, which is big data coming in to help exactly point us the right way.
How, when you're attending something as vast as the JP Morgan Healthcare Company, when you're looking at the US, when you're looking at your own portfolio companies, how do you find these particular ones to go in, to invest in? How do you see wheat from the chaff?
Well, that's the trick, isn't it? You know, there's so many wonderful ideas, so many wonderful possibilities. But you really do need to focus on where are the places where you're going to have the right teams, where the right field of science and medicine that you can really create something transformative. It's not easy.
It's not easy. That's why you're paid the big bucks. What about the regional perspective here? Is it all about what's happening in Silicon Valley, in the United States? What about Asia? What about Europe?
There is spectacular science and innovation happening on a global basis. But there is no question that Boston, Cambridge, and here the greater San Francisco areas are the #1 and #2 hubs.
And political environment. How does that make a positive or a negative picture for 2017? How has your view changed since you saw that the president-elect was going to be Donald Trump?
Well, I think there's lots of uncertainties. There are some things that could be very positive. There's a talk of bringing back a lot of cash that American companies have trapped overseas. We talked about M&A a little earlier. Depending on if that happens, how that happens, that could be a big boost, a turbocharge on the M&A side of things.
We'll see where that comes to event. Come back in 2017. Let us know how it's all progressing. Third Rock Ventures partner Alexis Borisy, always great to have you on the show. Now, we'll continue our coverage from JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco on Tuesday, when we'll hear from incoming CEO of Eli Lilly, that's Dave Ricks. Tune in for that conversation, 10 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. in London. You do not want to miss it. Up next, the iPhone turns 10. We'll take a look at how it became Apple's most important product and, well, whether the company can ever recreate its success. This is Bloomberg.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
10 years ago, Steve Jobs first unveiled a new product called the iPhone. At the time, it was seen as the heir to Apple's other hit products, the iPod, albeit an expensive one at $499. But since then, it's revolutionized the smartphone market, destroying then industry heavyweights Nokia and BlackBerry, and inspiring a handful of new rivals around the world. And Apple has sold over 1 billion iPhones to date. They helped drive up Apple's stock price more than 850% to its peak in 2015. In 2016, Strategy Analytics reported that smartphone operating profit hit $9.4 billion worldwide. Apple alone made up 91% of that. But with these numbers come high expectations. The iPhone is now Apple's most crucial product, making up 63% of revenue in fiscal 2016. And that's worried some investors because annual iPhone sales fell for the first time last year. And Apple's operating system held on to just 12.5% of the global market, versus rival Android's nearly 87% in the third quarter. Still, analysts remain overwhelmingly bullish on Apple's stock, such as Nomura, which believes the upcoming iPhone 8 will shatter all previous sales records.
That was Bloomberg's Caitlin Meehan for us. Now, since the iPhone took off, Apple has been under pressure to prove it can recreate that kind of sales success. Still with us for more is our guest host for the hour, Activate CEO Michael Wolff. Has Apple still got it, Michael?
They definitely have it. With over 1 billion iPhones being used today around the world and 100 million of them in the United States, they're poised for a large percentage of that base to upgrade to a new iPhone 8. And they've got a lot more coming. I mean, it's likely that they're going to have much more integrations of Siri. Their own messaging app, iMessage, will have bots and another functionality built in. And let's not forget that there's going to be a new operating system next year, likely in the middle of the year. So Apple already has everything they need to be successful, and they don't have to have all of the market. They can skim off the most profitable customers, the ones who will not only buy their phones, but will participate in the iTunes and App Store.
Michael, you're sounding pretty bullish. And in fact, over the past decade, ever since they launched their iPhone, the whole market has been pretty bullish. This is analyst recommendations on the Bloomberg. In fact, the majority, all the way back to 2007, have always said buy. The green chart here, I know you can't see, I'm just spilling it out for you here. The green here shows how many analysts say buy this stock. Look at that, 80% at current levels. The lowest they ever got was 65% back in 2008 or thereabouts. Generally, analysts say buy Apple. They look through the gloom. What about their movement into perhaps the emerging markets? Does that spell to you that they could be going for lower margin profits, or will they just go for the higher end products in the growing middle class, higher class in India and indeed the likes of China, where it's slightly slowing down, Michael?
Yeah, where Apple comes out with lower cost products, they don't seem to do as well. They can once again, they can go after the premium customer. They can go after the people who want to have the entire Apple experience. All they have to do, really, is to get a large percentage of the billion people today who are carrying around an iPhone to be able to continue that growth. And they've got a lot of other avenues into that growth, including new products like new Apple TV products and a new TV operating system that will allow them to get a lot more revenue out of this, not just in terms of the sale of the phone.
I think the services company aspect to Apple will come into the fore throughout 2017. Thank you, Michael. Guest host for the hour, Activate CEO Michael Wolff. Great to have you with us throughout this Monday. Finally, Twitter has suspended the account of former pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli for harassing a journalist. Shkreli changed his profile picture to an edited image where he appeared to be embracing a Teen Vogue reporter after the two disagreed over President-elect Donald Trump. Now, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Remember, you can watch all episodes live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV. That's weekdays at 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.